Hi guys, Foxdrop here with another question and answer video with Brokenshard. Brokenshard is my favourite special guest. He's been on here 2 times before, and if you haven't seen those videos, they'll be in the description. I did a question and answer video with him, and I also did like an in-game commentary analysis. Those links, like I say, will be in the description, so check those videos out. This video, I'm going to be focusing more about Dragonborns. So I want to learn who Dragonborns are, because now that you guys are in the LCS, you're going to be in the spotlight a lot more. You're going to be playing weekly against some of the top teams in Europe, so basically Dragonborns were kind of unknown before the qualifiers, and I just want to get to know Dragonborns a bit more. So first off, I just want to welcome you, Brokenshard. Thank you for doing another video with me, and just the first thing I want to ask you is how you managed to, well, how did you qualify? Like, not in a harsh way, but just how did your team pull out the victory? Like, you weren't favourites going into it. Your team was very new. You didn't have any background. So how did you, like, what did you employ? Did you just study really hard for it all, or how did you pull off victories?
I honestly had no clue how we qualified or how we managed to make that work out. I mean, it was a surprise for all of us. I mean, coming into the tournament, not a single one of us expected to get out. I mean, I think we knew we would get out of the group stages, but we didn't really expect to qualify. So,
I mean, you almost qualified in the easiest way possible. Like, you almost beat AAA right at the beginning. You were 1-0 up on them, and you almost just kind of like walked your way through to qualify. I mean, you had to take the long route around by beating MIM, who were they're pretty big favourites. They'd won IEM Singapore, they'd done well at IEM Cologne, so they were like a heavy favourite. But you guys, you 2-0'd them, I think you did, and you just showed, like, it looked as though your team was just such a veteran team, but you weren't really.
It's because we bring a different type. I think our biggest strength is that we bring a style of play that no one knows how to counter.
What would you say your style of play?
We specialize in so many different areas of champions. I think we win most of our games based on our picks of our comfort zone. I mean, all of us were just so we perform better at the LAN event than we've ever done before, and I think at the same time other teams performed less better.
Yeah.
All right, one of the examples would be how we picked Olaf, Sin, and Kale for a majority of the games in the first day.
I think Zin wasn't even that popular, was he, before the qualifiers?
No, I think Zin wasn't popular until after Diamond Prox played it, but me and Spontex have been playing Xin Zhao for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up, I think something is that we were a step ahead of the meta. Shushei was playing Kale mid, we were training it before anyone even thought about bringing Kale anywhere. And then I started playing Kale jungle after I'm So Fresh started playing it, until it became like, standard picks. And there were just too many champions that we were in a comfort zone with. For example, there were too many must bans.
Yeah, for your team, yeah.
People had to ban Evelynn against Spontex, who is known on the EU scene as the best Evelynn in EU. People had to ban Vi after they saw that Shushei could actually play her. AAA even banned Draven after Hosan wrecked with him, but that's something else. There were just too many must bans, and so always one of these favored champions kind of slipped through the cracks, and that's what kind of gave our team a little bit of an edge. And it still does. It's still one of our strongest points.
It's good. Would you say that as well because your team was unknown? Like, you're saying you had so many strong champions. Maybe you weren't kind of scouted out as much. Like, people didn't necessarily know who your strong champions were because they didn't really know who Dragonborns were.
Well, when people thought about me, everyone knew I played Xin Zhao, and Xin Zhao was like my favorite champion for the longest time. Everyone knew that, but no one expected me to favor Olaf so much, which is when I picked him up in the first game. And no one really thought Spontex would be playing Xin Zhao in top lane. So
fair enough. So just
it allowed us to switch it around. It allowed us to switch it around. It allowed us to put different champions in different locations. Like, we could pick Olaf and we could play him everywhere. Everywhere. We could play him in mid lane, and we have done it. So it was the fact that we could mind game with people, which is, I think, our strongest pick, our strongest strategy.
It's good. So just talking a little bit about your team as well. Now you've got something which the NA people from NA wouldn't really appreciate is the kind of, with the EU, with Europe, there are obviously so many different countries and nationalities in Europe. But when you look at like the NA teams, all of those players are either American or Canadian, at least 90% of the time. That's what happens. But like on your team, just alone on Dragonborns, you have 2 Polish people, you have 3 Swedish people, you've got a French guy, you've got an Israeli, which is you, obviously. I think you're aware of that, and you've even got a Lithuanian. So you have all these different nationalities in your team. Does that really does that have any negative impact on your team? Because if you all have to find like a common language, for example, like with language barriers, I presume it was probably going to be English. And if for most of those people, English isn't their first language. So if you have all these different nationalities talking in a language which isn't their native language, does that play any part with your team play and communication?
I don't think that just being from different countries affected us negatively in any way possible. It is, if you look at most of the teams that are actually in, well, actually, I'm not even going to go there because we have 3 full nationality teams in the LCS right now. Mm-hmm. We have a full Danish team, a full Russian team, and a full Spanish team. But when you really think about it, sometimes these can work in a negative way. The reason that it works for NA is because everyone plays on one server. And like NA is one entire continent, where EU is a continent filled with many different countries. So if you have a full Danish team, sometimes it's hard to find another good Danish player in case something goes wrong.
That's true.
For example, there were no real good Danish AD carries, so Tess had to move on to AD. There were no really good Danish. Well, actually, I'm just going to go with that. That's pretty much it.
It's a good example.
And this, of course, it helps if everyone can speak the same language. But if everyone can speak English at a semi-competent level, that completely takes out the language barrier. Since the most important calls are go in, back off, kill, poke, engage. I'm pretty sure even a grade schooler can learn those English words.
That's good. I like as well with I remember when Joe Miller, who was casting the LCS qualifiers, he said when you guys qualified, that one thing was for sure, that the LCS just got a little bit hairier. Because obviously referring to Hosan and Shushay, the two Polish players, with their lavish locks of hair, which are just way too much hair for a person to have.
I love Hosan's hair.
I have to ask you, now that you're manager as well, how much of the team expenses goes towards like shampoo and conditioner just to keep? Because obviously, without a doubt, your team's strongest point has to be the great hair on your mid laner and your AD carries. That's something you really have to put a lot of thought and effort into, and money and time, to make sure it's the best it can be.
What, the hair?
Yeah, of course.
How should I know? I have a buzz cut, man.
Well, okay.
Well, Shushay if this helps you, maybe Shushay took a long time in the shower because I told him, Shushay, get out of the shower. Some people need to take a shower. He's like, I need to wash my head.
Fair enough. Well, if you I'm sure you can't really empathise with those people, so I'll move on to the next one. So, when you picked up your new players, after you guys qualified for the LCS, you knew you'd be playing weekly, you'd be salaried by Riot. You picked up new players. You picked up Yamato Cannon and Extinct and Maluno. And especially with Extinct and Maluno, they had a good resume. They were both playing in Curse EU, and they had quite a lot of success in there. So there's no doubt that they're good, like solid individual players. Their skill was good, but at a high level League of Legends play, teamwork is a huge issue. Like, the Korean players have really good teamwork, and that's one of the reasons why they're so good. When you are recruiting players, do you just pick up the players who are the best individually, or is it something you take into account? Like, you play with them a bit, and if they really don't mesh, then you're just like, well, this guy may be a really good player, but he's not going to play well in the team. Because at the end of the day, if he doesn't work in the team, then he's not going to work. So is that something you had to think about when you recruited these people, or did you just pick up and kind of hope that there will be a mesh into your team?
Well, we tried out a few different people in the jungle before picking up, deciding finally on Maluno. We tried out Cyrescu, who is currently ranked 2 on Challenger in EU West. Finnish jungler. He was a solo queue player, and we were talking a lot with Amazing from Acer. Mm-hmm. However, it was clear that Amazing had other motives in his plans. And Cyrescu, even though he was a fantastic jungler, just lacked the experience and the leadership skills that was necessary. I mean, I'm not necessarily the best jungler. I could maybe consider myself a top 8 or top 9 or maybe top 10 jungler in EU. But what separates me from a majority of the other junglers is that I make the calls, the necessary calls, and I kind of kick the team in the ass when they need to focus up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I play the role of coach even when I was on the team.
Mm-hmm. You seem quite like an animated, like just watching you in the LCS when you have those kind of webcams on the players. You were pretty animated when you were coming in the games. You could tell of your team who was calling the shots, who was getting involved the most, and it definitely seemed to be you in that case. Do you think that's something your team will lack now that you've taken a step back, or are you still going to be there at all the LAN events behind the tables yelling at your team, or is that something which is going to have to be filled up by Maluna, who comes in now taking your spot?
I hope it doesn't affect him negatively. I mean, I have faith in Maluno for being the leader that he is, because he was the shot caller, at least for the most part, on Curse. And I hope that I have high hopes for the team that they can pull it together in my time of absence.
Cool, good. So now that's kind of like all I wanted to ask you about Dragonborns specifically. It's a nice intro. I guess the team, we'll be seeing them a lot more now in the LCS. I think your first game is tomorrow, I think?
Tomorrow.
Okay.
We play EG at 6 o'clock CET.
Okay, so that'll be your first time we actually see you in the LCS. So just talking a bit about your experience now as a high skill jungler, high elo in solo queue, and obviously being on a competitive team. So just some tips for solo queue really. So what would you say, if you could give one piece of advice to someone about how to improve their gank execution to make their ganks be more successful, what would you say? Just one thing. What piece of advice would you give to someone?
So how to make your ganks more effective?
Well, yeah, just gank execution in general. Like, for example, if I was to give an example, I'd be like, show your face, and then if they run away, don't necessarily leave the lane, because they might, get
Well, my best advice would be, sometimes it's better to wait for the enemy jungler to gank, even if it takes you 15-20 seconds, than to actually go and gank, because getting counter ganked is probably the worst thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going to take longer than 15 seconds to chase him down and kill him, don't bother, because the enemy jungler will be there, and that's a counter gank. And counter ganks usually end up in your buffs being on the enemy team.
Very good
So
advice.
be very, very careful about counter ganks and try to execute them yourself. Like, most people end up coming to top lane at double buff at level 3. That's probably the meta and has always been the best way to gank. However, with all the wards that are coming out, so I've taken a liking into just sneaking into the lane bush and either ganking or counter ganking from there. If I counter gank, the enemy jungler almost always dies instantly. And if I'm ganking from there, the enemy top laner doesn't recognize it. That also helps that if you've just ganked them, you can pretend to back, wait in the lane bush, and when he comes back, come out again. This works really well on Kayle and Xin Zhao, because you can necessarily save your gap closer or your slow when they start running away, because then they're walking up to you and you get like three or four auto hits before they're like, oh wait, this guy's hitting me. Better run away.
So what about another tip as well for what is one mistake you see people making, like a really common mistake people make in solo queue, which if they just eradicate from their game, they would improve? Just one mistake.
Too much all in.
Too much all in. Too
Yeah,
much, man.
people will go absolutely all in for a kill and not get it. Again,
Well, if they get it, both of them die anyway, so it's not
they'll
worth
get it and still die, but that happens way too much. It needs to stop.
Good advice. I'm not sure how many people will be willing to take that don't go so man mode advice, but
I go
good
all
advice.
in almost all the time, but at least I'm intelligent about it.
Fair enough. And also, last tip, last advice you could give someone. What would be just an overall? This is a really broad, open-ended question, but just an overall tip to someone looking to improve their solo queue performance. One thing you could say to them to help them do that.
To make them stop going all in?
No, just for solo queue, to improve their solo queue performance in general, to help them become better solo queue players. What would your one piece of advice be to them?
Don't chat to your team unless it's let's go, let's do this, let's poke, let's Drake time, let's push, let's group. Don't be like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. I mean, telling someone their mistakes is fine, but you don't play for your teammates, you play for yourself. You play for yourself to get better. So if your teammates feed, okay, they feed, but are you making the most of the situation? I mean, learning how to come back from a bad situation is probably the best thing. So if your teammates feed, you should thank them. It'll help you get back from bad situations. Think of it as a learning experience for yourself.
when your teammates feed, thank them. Brokenshard 2013. Best piece of advice. Well, that's pretty much all I wanted to ask you, actually. So yeah, thanks for doing another video with me. And as always, is there anyone you want to shout out, or any sponsors, or anything like that you want to mention at the end?
Just shout out to my team Dragonborns and to our sponsor SteelSeries and X-Note. And best of luck to the boys over on Saturday and Sunday versus EJ and SK.
Okay, I'll put the links to like your Facebook and all the Dragonborn relative links into the description. So if you're watching this and you want to check them out, click the links in the description. But as always, Brokenshard, thank you very much for doing this video with me, and thank you guys for watching. So thanks again, Brokenshard, and we'll see you in my next video.
Nice.